Good morning. Welcome to First Edition, the online ministry of First Community Church. My name is Glenn Miles. I'm the senior minister here in this amazing congregation, and we are thrilled that you've joined us on this day for worship. We want you to know, no matter where you're from, where you're going, what you believe, or even what you don't believe, you are accepted and welcomed in this church. Today, my sermon focuses on Jesus' conversation with Peter about forgiveness. Peter kicks it off. He asks Jesus, how often should I forgive? 7 times? And Jesus says, no, 77 times. And some of the old Greek manuscripts seem to imply 70 times 7, 490 times. But it's not about math. What Jesus is saying to Peter and to us in the Christian community, in any relationship that matters in your life, forgiveness must be foundational to all of them. I really enjoyed this sermon. I'm looking forward to sharing it with you. One more thing. There's a QR code up on your screen right now. Capture that with the camera option on your phone, and you can register your attendance, share a prayer concern that you have, and if you choose to do so, you can give to the offering as well. I'm glad you're with us. Let's worship together. Several years ago, I was leading a Bible study on the Gospel of Matthew. On the day that we came to this text, the one that Jennifer read for you a moment ago, I opened up the class by asking this question. When was the last time you needed forgiveness? There are about 20 or 30 adults in this Bible study. This man in his early 70s raised his hand. He said, I think, Glenn, it's been about 10 years. There was a hush in the group. And his wife said, buddy, we got to talk. I suspect most of us would not need to think back 10 years to remember the last time we needed forgiveness. But when was it? How long has it been for you? A year? A month? A day? 45 minutes? How long has it been? Foundational to every relationship that matters in your life, foundational to every community that you participate in, that you believe is important, especially a community of faith, foundational to those relationships is a sense of forgiveness, a willingness to both give and receive forgiveness. And yes, both actions oftentimes need to be learned. Learn how to give forgiveness and learn how to receive it. Because communities of faith and relationships and things that really matter can sometimes get very messy, very confusing, very complex and perplexing, and all the other verbs that you can think of to describe it. Sometimes it's very difficult to be in relationship with one another. In fact, I was reading Barbara Brown Taylor this week, one of my favorite preachers, and she says, rather than our slogan being, everyone here is welcomed and accepted, instead we should put a banner out on the corner that says, we're doing the best we can. Maybe there's some truth there. Maybe it ought to just be more honest. Say, we're just doing the best we can. And then maybe another sign above the entrance to the sanctuary at the back of our space here that says, Christians meet here. Enter at your own risk. I like that. I like the way that implies that being in relationship with each other is risky business. If we're truly going to be engaged in a cruciform way, both with God and with human beings, with God and with each other, then there's implied risk there. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be something we can just gently wade into. Not at all. My friend Stuart was a mayor of a small suburb outside of a large metropolitan area. He served 3 terms in a row, did a very beautiful job as mayor, led with grace, took on some tough issues, and as you can imagine, there was conflict along the way here and there. And then when his terms were over, his congregation nominated him to be on the governing board at his church. He called me and asked for some advice. He said, what do I need to do? And I said, Stuart, your experience as a mayor will be very helpful. You already have the experience and the skills to deal with the kind of issues that come up on a governing board. And there was silence on the other end, and then he said, but Glenn, I've had to deal with serious conflict and people angry and different things going on. Votes had to be taken, and there were 2 sides on issues, and it was really tough. And I said, exactly, you're well qualified. And then I said, Stuart, always, always, always be ready to come to the table, willing to forgive and be forgiven. If you bring those 2 gifts and that willingness, you'll be an amazing board member, and your board will thank you for it. It's my friend Mike Yaconelli, whose book, Messy Spirituality, I'm rereading here during the season of Lent as a daily devotional, who reminds us that Christians are unfinished. Don't you like that? Unfinished. We're not waiting to attain some sort of spiritual glory or some sort of theological understanding. No, we're unfinished. We're works in progress. We're walking with Jesus along the way, recognizing that sometimes it can get messy. Sometimes it can get unhappy. But if we're willing to be in relationship with each other, we're willing to walk through whatever the mess itself may be. We see that in the text today. Peter, who's been kind of our guide for this sermon series, is today the model student, the perfect disciple. He looks like a modern seeker. He wants to know, how often do I need to forgive? How many times should I forgive? Is it 7? Think about where Peter was before we got to this moment. Peter has stumbled and fallen several times. He's been less than the perfect disciple. He's been less than the perfect student. And yet the good news about Peter for us is that every time he's stumbled, every time he's made a serious mistake, he's gotten back up, brushed off whatever dirt he's fallen into, and he keeps moving forward with Jesus. And here he is with Jesus now, demonstrating what it means to be a very good student. He's asking his teacher, his rabbi, how many times do I need to forgive? Is it 7? That sounds like a lot. Jesus says 77 times. In fact, the Greek's a little fuzzy. Some scholars argue and say that what Jesus really said was 70 times 7. But here's the thing. It's not about math. Jesus isn't giving Peter some impossibly high standard to try to live up to. Jesus is not about math. He doesn't have an MBA. He's not trying to run a business. He's doing something completely different. He's setting the tone for how he wants Peter and the church that Jesus is founding to be based and founded upon the constant need in the community to forgive and be forgiven. There's another story that Jesus tells that also seems like it might be about math, but it's not. It's the story of the good shepherd who has 99 sheep in safely, but there's one that has wandered and gone away. And according to Jesus' story, that shepherd leaves the 99 and goes to find the one who's lost. Now this, again, from a business standpoint, makes no sense. Why would you put 99% of your product at risk just to go find 1%? Build that into your business plan. Build it in as expected loss. Make that a part of how you're understanding the way things are going to go in the business world. But Jesus is not worried about any of that. He's not an accountant. He's not worried about keeping track. The only thing he's worried about is finding you and me when we find ourselves lost and wandering away. It's the great theologian Robert Capon who says the one sheep represents the one world. That sheep represents all of us. You know the gospel hymn that's inspiring this sermon series, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing, has a line in it where it says, Jesus sought me while a stranger, wandering from the fold of God. Have you wandered? Have you been lost? Have you made some choices that have harmed your relationship with the ones you love the most? The promise here at the heart of today's gospel is that Jesus, that God's very self, will come to find you and bring you back in safely in the arms of love. Stanley Hauerwas is another good theologian. He talks about what he calls a politics of forgiveness. In the church, he's a theological professor of ethics. He says, in the church, we practice a politics of forgiveness over against the politics in our culture of envy, hatred, and revenge. He wrote those words in 2006. He could have written them today, couldn't he? Politics of forgiveness over and against a politics of envy, hatred, and revenge. This is an invitation for us to put that politic, that practice of forgiveness into place so that it becomes a natural part of everything we do and say here in this community of faith. Yesterday in this very room, we celebrated the amazing life of Jim Turner. Jim was madly in love with his wife, Sandy, throughout their more than 50-year marriage. He loved his family. He loved First Community Church, especially Camp Akita and all that's connected and associated with it. He received his block of wood when he was in the 9th grade at First Community South, standing up on the chancel with dozens of other kids receiving the same. His whole life has been centered on this church and the love and grace that we try to put into practice here. I told a story in the service about a note that he received from a young adult who knew Jim and Sandy Turner when he was younger, as a child. You see, Jim and Sandy were part of a couple circle, one of the couple circles here at First Community. And this young adult wrote to him to say, I saw in you and your wife and my parents and all the other adults who were willing to let us be kids, who also just quietly became models for how to treat each other with love and respect. It was a beautiful tribute from one who's grown now to great success in his own life, to say to Jim, thank you for modeling love and respect. I said, though, in the meditation yesterday in the memorial service that I'm pretty sure, I know most of those people in that couple circle, none of them are perfect. They're fine folks, but none of them are perfect. And I'm pretty sure their couple circle's been together for 50 years. I'm fairly certain there have been moments when somebody had to say, I'm sorry. And somebody else had to say, you're forgiven. If the relationship matters, we're going to take the risk of humbling ourselves, of giving ourselves fully to that other person, to be forgiven and to forgive. You know, in our world right now, in a world, especially in this culture, in this country, where insults and meanness and put-downs and mendacity and failure to tell the truth somehow have become political slogans, we need more examples like that small group. We need more examples like this church and this congregation, like many of the people who are sitting out here today, who can provide models to the country, to the culture, to the world of what it means to be in relationship with each other, to give ourselves away fully, completely, in the name of the one who loves us all. You see, what Jesus is trying to do is is trying to set up a new understanding, a new way of being. He wants to make sure that they understand that foundationally to who they are as people of faith is the idea of giving and receiving forgiveness. It's kind of like this. Do you remember the old Oprah talk show? Some of you remember? Yes, some of you do. And there was a time, I don't know, a few years ago when she started giving away prizes. And one day she gave out a free car. And she said, Sarah, you get a free car. And Sarah jumps up and runs over to the car, and she gets inside it, and it's great, and she's all excited, and it's wonderful and joyful. And then Oprah goes and looks around the rest of the audience and says, and you get a car, and you get a car, and you get a car, and you get a car. Jesus has the same idea, except for Jesus, it's you need forgiveness, and you need forgiveness, and you need forgiveness. Sarah needs it, and so do I. He wants to make sure that everyone understands that this is foundational to what it means to be in a community of grace where we're willing to humble ourselves. You know, just before the teaching that we heard from Jennifer a moment ago, Jesus invites a little child to stand before the disciples. And he says to his disciples who are arguing over who is going to be the greatest in the kingdom, who is going to be in charge and who is going to be in command, and other egotistical needs, he brings this little child in and he says, if you want to experience heaven, become like her, and you'll already be there. I'm reading a preacher during this series who's helped me think about questions at a much deeper level than I normally get to. She's pushing me hard. She asks this week, in light of forgiveness, what about the most vulnerable, the little ones in our community? What do we do with the vulnerable? How do we treat them? And what she makes very clear is it's not just about the children. Jesus' illustration here is a broad way of understanding the vulnerable within our community. The vulnerable are those who've been harmed or injured, those who face sorrow and grief, sadness or worry, those who've been rejected by their families or left alone and unloved. Those are the vulnerable among us. When those are harmed, especially by someone in power, how do we react? Do we immediately express forgiveness to that one who did the harming, or do we first react to the vulnerable? Grace always, always, always cares first for the victim. So yes, this is hard work. This is messy work. This is the kind of work that people get into, though, when they care for and love each other. I started to learn this when I was a little kid. I'm the oldest of four children. They're my two sisters and my brother who is in the resurrection now. We were taught when we were little kids that if you did something wrong to your sister, I know this is going to be a shock to you, but occasionally I would tease my sisters and make them cry. Not very often, but it happened a few times. And my mom would say, Glenn, you need to go and kiss your sister on the cheek and tell her you're sorry. And my exact words were, ugh. But I'd do it because there's no dinner or playtime unless you do it. So I would go over and I'd press my cheek against hers, give her a very quick kiss on the cheek, and then go do whatever else was next on my list for the day. And I've been thinking about that for a long time, about the sort of simplistic, the simple brilliance of that. The simple brilliance of being required to place my cheek on the cheek of my sister, to see our shared humanity, to recognize we share that same creative spark within our souls. I didn't understand all that at 8 or 9 years old, but the older I get, the more I see how beautiful it is to recognize in the other their humanity and their need to both give and receive forgiveness. My little brother, who's, I said a moment ago, is in the resurrection now. I remember talking to him about this. I'm 8 years older than David, and David just kind of followed me around like a puppy when we were kids. But my brother had to apologize to his sisters often, and he just said, Glenner, that was like going through hell, I got to tell you. It was just like going through hell. And I said, brother, let me preach to you for just a moment. The good news is God promises to go to hell with us. That no matter how horrible or awful or terrible it may feel in the moment, God promises to be with us, even in that place, even if we've put ourselves there. The promise from God is that God will go with us. How often do we forgive? Is it 7 times? 77? 70 times 7, which I think is 490? Maybe we need to listen to that great theologian Buzz Lightyear. What did he say? To infinity and beyond. We know Disney better than the Bible. To infinity and beyond. That's the good news of this day. God's love is even greater and around longer than infinity. The grace, love, and forgiveness of God is there for all of eternity, where we will finally be welcomed home in the arms of God's abiding love.